July 17 edition of PFT PM, 11 days away from the return of PFT Live. Unless I get fired before then, the chances of that happening is always somewhere on the radar screen. A lot of it depends upon me. Some of it may depend upon others. I am just kidding. I think, I hope, I pray. Which brings us to the first topic today. Pablo Torre and I got together again earlier this week. We did about an hour and a half, somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours. Now, it got edited down to an hour, and I should probably go watch the latest episode of Pablo Torre Finds Out, which delves into yet another grievance ruling between the NFL and the NFL Players Association that was hidden. The last time around, it was the collusion ruling that the NFLPA should have been trumpeting, partial win, plenty of evidence pointing to actual collusion. It was hidden until Pablo and I worked together to shake the trees enough to make the fruit fall, and he's the one that found the decision. Now, remember, part of the why, we were trying to figure out why. Why would the NFLPA hide this ruling? And one reason was that current executive director Lloyd Howell doesn't necessarily want to give his predecessor, DeMaurice Smith, any credit. And by trumpeting a grievance that had been the brainchild of D. Smith, had been initiated by him, instigated by him, pursued by him, if that ends up being a win, then all of a sudden the D. Smith gain leverage through litigation approach may seem better than Lloyd Howell's idea that we should try to get along and go along and move along arm in arm with the NFL. Someone reached out to me in the aftermath of the last round of this and said, hey, there's another reason why they want to keep this quiet. There's another reason why, and I didn't mention earlier, the whole J.C. Tretter, Russell Wilson text messages. Remember that? That was one of the proffered reasons for burying the decision, to protect Tretter against embarrassment for saying mean things about Russell Wilson when he didn't take a fully guaranteed contract. So someone reached out and said there's another reason they may be trying to protect J.C. Tretter, because there was another grievance and it didn't go well for the union. And J.C. Tretter is the one who was in the crosshairs of it. And so if that one's kept quiet in return for the partial victory in the collusion ruling grievance being kept quiet, it's a nice little convenient quid pro quo. So that, along with just the general desire to update the situation, the Lloyd Howell conflict of interest, all the other things happening within the union as this case moves forward, as the collusion grievance moves forward, there's going to be an appeal. Could it be settled? We thought it made sense to get together and have another session. And one of the things that we learned in advance of the most recent episode of Pablo Torre Finds Out, there was indeed a grievance that was filed by the league against the union for the comments made by J.C. Tretter on Ross Tucker's podcast 2 years ago, during which Tretter essentially suggested to then disgruntled running backs, if you don't like your situation, fake an injury. You can't be fined for not practicing because you're injured. Now, I can't say that publicly, but so that became a grievance. And it was a clear winner for the NFL. And the NFL knew about it for months. It was issued on February 20, just a month and a few days after the collusion ruling came out, February 20 of 2025. It wasn't publicized. It wasn't leaked. It wasn't announced. I suggested earlier today that the league hid it from its constituents. The league sent me an on-the-record statement saying that the owners and other key personnel were told about it in March at Palm Beach. Now, I asked the general manager the other day about the fake injury grievance. What are you talking about? Was basically I don't know anything about that. Once I told this person the details that J.C. Tretter had suggested that running backs fake injuries. I don't know anything about that. So maybe this GM wasn't in the room when they provided the update. And even if they did tell the teams about it, they managed to keep it from becoming public. They've got reporters who are on the payroll. Very easy to give them documents that would allow them to report that the NFL had won this slam dunk grievance, which ultimately created a cease and desist order telling the NFLPA to not violate the CBA by basically encouraging players to stage individualized strikes. That's what it is. You can't have a strike during the term of the CBA. Well, if a player is deciding to create his own strike by faking an injury, that's a problem. If you're telling him to do it, that's a problem. If you're suggesting he should do it, that's a problem. So they were told, don't do it. Now, does it make sense for the union to trade secrecy as to the collusion ruling for secrecy as to the J.C. Tretter fake injury grievance? Does that make sense to the rank and file? Does that make sense? Is that in the best interest of the players? No. It's in the best interest of J.C. Tretter, possibly Lloyd Howell, the only two witnesses called in that hearing, and they were both called by the NFL, not by the NFLPA. So that's for others to decide. That's for the players, if they care about their union, to ask some tough questions, to seek some clear answers, to maybe insist on some decisive action. Because it sure looks like, from the perspective of an outsider, a meddling outsider who wants to be the executive director of the union or whatever other stuff they're saying to get the players on the executive committee to not listen to me, whatever that may be. And I really don't, I'm past that. I don't care. I don't even need to say it again. I have no desire to be the executive committee of the NFLPA. I would never do it, ever, 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 never. So, and I'm not trying to install someone who would then do favors for me or whatever else, however else the sausage gets made in positions like that. I'm not interested. I'm interested in helping the players. And the point is this: the players at some point need to care, and they need to wonder what's really going on here. And as I've said before, the league has weaponized their apathy against them for years. More recently, it feels like non-player leadership of the union is weaponizing the players' apathy against them. Now, a couple other things to keep an eye on. The collusion case will go forward on appeal. And based upon the various timelines set forth in the CBA, it could move fairly quickly. And it looks like this three-person panel that handles the appeal, it looks like they could just disagree with the system arbitrator. If it's 2-1, if two of them out of the three think that there's evidence there to show collusion, the union could still win. This thing could still get very interesting unless it's settled. And as I've said before, I hope it's not settled because the union decides to give up its appeal rights because the NFL has a specious claim for $12 million or more in attorney's fees and costs. I hope that the union doesn't think that's a good deal, because that's not a good deal. Because I think the NFL will have a very hard time getting a penny under the standard articulated in the CBA, because there was a good faith basis for the union to go forward with its claim, as evidenced by the fact that they scored a partial win. So the collusion appeal goes forward. And here's the problem. Look at what they've been hiding from us, media and fans. If they strike a deal to resolve the collusion grievance on appeal, will we even know about it? Will there be another episode of Pablo Torre Finds Out at some point in the future where we report on what ultimately happened? Because they've got no mechanism in place where they will necessarily tell us that this has been settled. And they've got the ultimate array of 272 bright, shiny objects coming up, starting soon, 7 weeks from today. Football season is back. And we will be distracted from these other issues. And we will be focusing only on football. And things will be forgotten, just like I forgot all about the J.C. Tretter fake injury grievance. We had written about it multiple times. I'd forgotten all about it until the person pointed out to me, hey, this may be one of the reasons why the NFL and the NFLPA have this deal to keep things quiet. Okay, one last thing as it relates to the union. The Lloyd Howell stuff, and I'm going to be writing about this. There's still an investigation being conducted by a lawyer from the firm of WilmerHale. And one of the things I explained to Pablo, and one of the things I'll explain in more detail at PFT, it's very important to know when an independent investigation happens, who the person is that's providing the mission to the lawyer, and whether the lawyer understands the basic ritual of getting repeat business when it comes to being hired to do investigations. They're never truly independent. Smart lawyers know how to pick up on what the person hiring them to do the investigation would like the outcome of the investigation to be. And I'm not suggesting that you fabricate evidence. I'm not suggesting that you lie or you commit fraud. All I'm saying is there's a lot of different ways the facts can go. There's a lot of different interpretations of the evidence. And lawyers that aspire to work for companies that are hoping to get justification through an independent investigation to do whatever they want, if you have a reputation for giving that client what they want, basically whitewashing the situation and legitimizing the final analysis by providing evidence to back up the conclusion, you get more of that work. And we've been talking a lot about conflicts of interest here. Man, there's some conflicts of interest with WilmerHale. We'll be writing about that. WilmerHale's done work for the NFL. WilmerHale's been the subject of a claim made by Lane Johnson about the lack of objectivity of WilmerHale counsel in other matters. So there's some meat on that bone. And then back to conflicts of interest and Lloyd Howell. One of the fascinating aspects of the latest episode of Pablo Torre Finds Out, something I didn't even know about, the selectively edited comments of Lloyd Howell from the Super Bowl press conference earlier this year, which just puts greater emphasis on his clear and obvious conflict of interest by virtue of his employment with the Carlyle Group and its connection to the NFL. And the editing of his comments would suggest that they're trying to keep people from connecting those dots and asking questions and possibly spurring action, like Lloyd Howell immediately being expected to give up his side gig with the Carlyle Group, and or this entire episode greasing the skids for Howell to be out of a job. All right, moving on. There's something weird going on with Najee Harris and the Chargers. And we know that he suffered what his agent calls a superficial eye injury during a 4th of July celebration, which entailed a fireworks mishap. That was straight from the statement that Doug Hendrickson issued. After several days of poking around and trying to understand, and no, he's fine, no, he's fine, no, he's fine. Oh, he has a superficial eye injury. Okay, well, what does that mean? And from the Chargers' perspective, they'll get a chance to fully and directly examine Najee Harris when he shows up. Now, they have the right to get access to some of these medical records that are being generated by the treatment he's received over the past week and a half. But the bottom line is he's going to start training camp on the non-football injury list. He was still seeing doctors in the Bay Area. And the Chargers are going to have to make some assessments here about the situation. And remember this, if you get yourself injured away from football, the team has options. At a minimum, they don't have to pay your salary this year. They also could try to attack the signing bonus based upon the default language, because you've engaged in activities that have rendered you unable to perform. If Najee Harris's stint on the NFI list is more than just a few days, and it may just be. The point I made yesterday on social media, after I had a chance to just kind of process this and think about it, it's just weird. Everything about it's weird. Something weird's going on here. I feel like, and I'm conditioned after my 2 appearances with Pablo Torre to always wonder what's being hidden from us, but it just feels like something's being hidden here, because I know the first 4 or 5 days I was working on the Najee Harris story, I was led to believe he's fine, uninjured. Oh, superficial eye injury. Okay, what's that mean? Well, we don't know. Well, we'll find out. We'll see. But there's a way they could recover the money they've paid him. There's a way they could avoid paying him any additional money. They could negotiate some sort of an outcome that would be a compromise, and it would avoid any type of litigation. And I think I have the note here. He has received $2.75 million of his $3.75 million signing bonus. The other $1 million is due March of next year. That could just never be paid. The salary this year may never be paid. I mean, these are all things that could happen. We'll see how that plays out. But first and foremost, and I hope he's healthy, I hope he can play. This is just one of those situations where there's enough weirdness happening that the spider sense starts to tingle, and you think, let's just see how this plays out, because something about it seems off. There's nothing that seems off about Von Miller signing with the Washington Commanders. This is a team that's trying to close the gap with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't know how much gas Von Miller has left in the tank. He was the second overall pick in the 2011 draft. He was the MVP of Super Bowl 50. He won another Super Bowl with the LA Rams in 2021. And he was available. Remember earlier this week, his agent said 3 teams were interested, and some agents will respond to that kind of thing by saying, if you aren't naming the teams, no one's really interested. But apparently the Commanders were, and the deal is done. There was, and I don't know that it was entirely done, but it was close enough that Miller announced it on social media. Others reported it was closer done, but I haven't seen any numbers yet. And there's a rule of thumb. And it's been a busy morning. Maybe I've missed it, and I apologize if I have, but there's a rule of thumb in the NFL agent world that if the numbers don't come out within 24 hours after the deal is announced or the impending deal is announced, the numbers are nothing to brag about. So we'll see what kind of a deal Von Miller got. And I know one guy that's going to be paying attention is Terry McLaurin, because he's trying to get paid by the Washington Commanders. And he's already seen Deebo Samuel show up, and he's going to make more money this year than McLaurin, unless and until McLaurin gets a raise. And we'll see what kind of a deal that Von Miller gets. My guess is there'll be a lot tied up in per-game roster bonuses. There'll be a lot tied up in incentives, sacks, maybe playoff incentives. It's one of those things where the maximum value is going to look pretty good, but he's going to have to do a lot to get there. And he's going to have to be able to play a lot to get there. That's my guess. And again, as I said, busy day. Maybe those details are already out there, but I haven't seen it yet, haven't heard it yet. I have heard and I have seen this one. 30 unsigned second-round picks. Well, no, it's now down to 29 because Alfred Collins, 49ers defensive tackle, 43rd overall pick in the draft, agreed to terms last night. And I'm surprised it's someone in that spot. That was the 11th pick in the round. I thought it would either be somebody near the top or somebody near the bottom that would do a deal. And 77% of the slot that Collins has last year, 77% of the contract was fully guaranteed. This year it's 88%. So he's gotten a bump. He's gotten a bump. But here's the problem. He's created the ceiling for everyone taken after him, and he's created the floor for everyone taken ahead of him. And there's a risk that the next guy taken after him is going to get more than 88%. And then that's going to look like a bad deal. But chances are the teams will use that now as ceiling and floor in both different directions. And that'll become a data point that helps figure out the rest of the round. So this is consistent with everything I've been saying about what the players and the agents in round 2 should have been doing in theory and what they will do in practice. And in practice, guys are going to do what's right for them. And guys are going to take the deals that are right for them. And Alfred Collins wanted to get to work, and he's getting an 11% bump, 77 to 88, fully guaranteed. Good enough for me. The problem is that's not going to be good enough for others. And if they had all held together, maybe more of them would have gotten 100. Maybe he would have gotten 100. Maybe guys behind him would have gotten 100. We don't know. It's why they should have been working together under the direction and guidance of the union. They should have had a Zoom with all the agents. They should have come up with a plan. They should have tried to implement it together. But the problem is your players have to be willing to say, no, I'm not signing. And all it takes is one. And with or without the effort to coordinate, we already have one. And my guess is others will soon begin to fall in line. All right, a couple of questions real quickly. This one's going to be shorter than usual because this is just one of them days. This is one of them days. And I got a meeting coming up in about an hour that is related and unrelated to the main mission here. And maybe I'll explain it someday. Maybe I won't. But it's just another reason why I can't just babble on and on as long as I ordinarily do today. Got other stuff to get ready for. Okay, Dan Mushman. Will the ever-expanding NFL playing more games around the world? Can you see, or with the, let me try that again, with the ever-expanding NFL playing more games around the world, can you foresee a time when the NFL falls foul of the law in other countries? Maybe a collusion case could be brought in, say, Australia. Do you think the NFL's legal team has considered this. I hadn't considered it. I don't know if they have. I'm sure they have, though, because the prospect of playing games in other countries opens an entire universe of issues. And you've got exchange rates, you've got tax rates, you've got different governments. And yeah, you may have business practices that are perfectly fine in the United States become not fine in another country. And how does that complicate the union relationship? Now, there are plenty of American-based countries that do business all over the world, but these are things the NFL is going to have to consider. Every time you're operating in one state in the U.S. and you move to other states, you have to consider, if you have operations in those states, what are the laws of those states? Move to other countries, you got to do the same thing. So I think the NFL will be appropriately buttoned up, but that's just another one of the issues and potential complications of moving teams into other countries and also playing games in other countries. It could be simply playing games in other countries opens the NFL up to some sort of regulatory oversight or judicial system oversight in these other countries. J14 Mitchell, should players and agents really emphasize signing shorter term contracts like 2 to 4 years max instead of being under contract for 5 or 6 years? Teams like to guarantee short, so players should sign short and get back to the table sooner. Hey, that makes sense in theory, but J14 Mitchell, here's the problem. The teams want to have the non-guaranteed back end for a couple of reasons. They want to spread out the cap hit from the signing bonus and the money that's paid out early, and they want to have that year-to-year luxury of whether or not they're going to keep the player on the team at an affordable rate without the player coming back. If the player's playing well, if the player's not playing well, tear it up. If the player is playing well, he's coming back to the table. Give me more, give me more, give me more. You avoid that if you put 3 years on the back end of the 2 guaranteed years, or 2 years on the back of 3 guaranteed years, whatever it is. So shorter term deals are better if you can get them. That's why the Trey Smith deal, great deal for him. It's 4 years total and 3 years as a practical matter guaranteed. The Dak Prescott deals that he's been doing, 4 years, 4 years. That's great. 4 years from signing, not 4-year extensions, 4 years from signing. I don't know if his latest was a 4-year extension or not. I need to look that up, but he's done a great job of negotiating for himself. And more players need to try. The problem is the teams will say, no, this is our offer. Take it or leave it. And my biggest piece of advice when it relates to those non-guaranteed back-end years, it's critical to have a trigger in there in March that either has a massive payment due or guarantees salary, something to force the team to cut the guy so the team can't string the guy along, cut him late in the year, or go to him right before the start of the regular season and say, if you don't take a massive pay cut, you're going to be cut. And oh, by the way, everybody else's roster is set, so you're screwed. You want to force these issues to a head in March. That's the most important thing to have in the non-guaranteed years of a long-term deal. This is the last one. Column MU Simons. Do you remember the first time you met Sims in person? And I do. I do. It was in the media center in Houston, Super Bowl 51. I was walking to the PFT Live set, and I saw a giant approaching me. I looked for the nearest beanstalk, and he smiled and he introduced himself. And I always wonder when it's somebody new, like, what's this person think of me? Are they mad about something I wrote 10 years ago that I completely have forgotten about? But he was nice. He was charitable. He was fine. And he didn't put his meat hooks on me. He didn't try to do the Vulcan death grip on my leg, which he does now. I liked him better when I didn't know him. When I didn't know him, there were barriers. Now there are no barriers. And oh, by the way, in 2 weeks, we'll be in Canton, Ohio for a couple of days where there will be no barriers. And he'll dig those giant fingers into my thigh and reach bone. That's how hard he grips with the Vulcan death grip, or just jostle me around. Although, remember, I've done the research. At the age of 60, elder abuse laws come into play. I don't even make light of that because I know it's a real problem in today's society, but I'm now in the protected class. So Sims or anyone else, beware. You don't want to get a felony rap on top of the misdemeanor battery charge because you beat up on an old man. That's it for today. Tried to get it done in a half hour, and I think I accomplished that. Thanks as always for some of your time. We'll be back on Friday for an all-new edition of PFT PM. Until then, check us out around the clock at profootballtalk.com. Have a great day. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.